It's been my belief more or less since I first got introduced to the concept of superheroes back in my childhood that Spider-Man is everything Superman is, but better in every conceivable way. Though it took me some years to amass the requisite knowledge and vocabulary to articulate exactly why I felt this. To do so, I need to first get you to grips with some basic writing precepts, namely Sanderson's second law, which states that limitations are always more interesting than abilities, and what exactly is meant by a character being overpowered. Going from the last to the first, if we understand power, as I've said many times before, to mean simply the ability to do, i.e. X is within my power, means I can do that. And when we understand the basis for all stories is characters needing to solve problems, and the structure of said story is the efforts they take in that regard. When combined with Sanderson's second law, we can quite easily deduce a state of being overly powerful to mean a character who is too capable of solving the problems, or types of problems, they're being presented with for it to make a satisfying story. Perhaps no greater example of that phenomenon, of being too powerful to be meaningfully challenged, exists than the OG Big Blue Boy Scout himself. An under-recognized feature of whom being that he was a direct refutation of the Nazis' perverted master race rendition of Nietzsche's philosophical concept of the Superman. Now, in the spirit of full transparency, this video was initially meant to be me ragging on Superman and his clones, while also lionizing my personal icons, Spider-Man, Iron Man, and Batman specifically. But apart from that, having already been done so far to death at this point that the Grim Reaper himself considers its soul as counterfeit upon further consideration, it occurs to me that the problem lies not so much in the character's concept itself, but with its thoughtless execution by the plurality of modern comic writers. You see, all characters in fiction, as well as the whole of fiction itself, exist to allow us, the audience, a platonic vehicle through which to explore hypothetical questions about ourselves, life, the universe, and everything else there may or may not be beyond our mere mortal concepts of the same. And here's where I think the true fundamental flaw in the character of Superman lies. In essence, Superman's whole shtick is that he is physically insurmountable. Therefore, the question he exists to ask and answer is, how would a physically omnipotent being act? To which the answer is blatantly obvious to anyone with an iota of understanding about humanity. Given that what keeps normal human behavior within the bounds of social and moral acceptability is the threat of physical force, when that avenue of leverage is neutralized, you have a being who's beholden to no one and nothing, who could do whatsoever he pleased, since the arbiters of order would be physically incapable of stopping him. To quote the original architect of the Man of Tomorrow concept, "It is the same with man as with a tree. The more he seeks to rise into the light, the more vigorously his roots struggle earthward, downward, into the dark, the deep, into evil." In retrospect, it probably says more about the human condition than most people would be comfortable admitting that we can look at a guy with the power to fly, bench press planets, and shoot laser beams out of his face and think the most unrealistic thing about it is that he's never once tempted to use those powers for personal gain. Granted, Superman has gone off the rails and solo conquered the Earth on more than several occasions, but I still maintain that Spider-Man is a superior character in that regard because he actually has to consistently live with the consequences of his actions. He's forced to struggle under the weight of the responsibility incumbent upon his great power. He can't just pawn it off by going and getting a solar booster shot. Peter Parker has every reason to put the mask down, and no one could really say they'd fault him if he did. And therein lies the crux of my argument. In Nietzschean terms, the Superman is neither God or Christ, neither saint nor devil. He is a man, not an ordinary man granted, but a being with mostly the same wants, fears, faculties, and faults as anyone else. To wit, the Superman is the meaning of the earth. Let your will say the Superman is the meaning of the earth. Be true to the earth, and do not believe those who speak to you of otherworldly hopes. They are poisoners, whether they know it or not. This is what makes Spider-Man the greater Superman. In essence, he's not merely mortal, but human in every meaningful way. Not just in the sense that a bullet to the brain will terminate his life subscription, or in that he is only strong in the sense of physical prowess, he doesn't have heat or X-ray vision or super hearing, but that he actually can't save everyone, and that he's rarely confronted with a problem he can solve just by pummeling it into a lower dimension. However, the big problem with this approach when it comes to Superman is that characters at his power level fall prey to what I've decided to dub the Superman paradox in his honor, which, as I've conceived it, goes something like this. If your story's conflict can be resolved through brute force, then it cannot involve Superman and be engaging. Thus, the only Superman story that can be engaging is one wherein the core conflict cannot be resolved by punching, such as mediating or enforcing international laws and treaties, where the conflict for him is whether to uphold the letter of the law or to hold to the mark of his own conscience. There, problem solved, right? Well, no. You see, the issue is that most people don't pick up superhero comics to read about geopolitics or trade negotiations. The main appeal of them, and of all our mythological folk and fictional heroes when you get right down to it, is the catharsis of seeing a big, strong, brave man punch the bad people who we're otherwise powerless to stand up to on our own in the face for us. And thus, if you want to sell your comic book to as many people as possible, that's the marketing plan you're going to want to stick to. Basically, this is to say that the core of the superhero across time is, and has always been, nothing more than raw, escapist power fantasy. Their whole shtick being to masturbate the notion that good will always triumph over evil, no matter how routinely or profusely the real world works to frustrate this notion. Therefore, the solution to making their most iconic incarnation more engaging is not to reinvent the genre wholesale, but merely to revive it from the castrated stupor the Silver Age has left it in by allowing our heroes to truly exemplify manly virtue again in the way that characters like Doc Savage, the Shadow, Zorro, the Lone Ranger, Conan the Barbarian, and more recently John Wick have done, namely by embodying the median point between a noble but self-righteous knight and an honorable but merciless barbarian, to be an adamantine bridge between tyrannical order and hellish chaos, and to not be held as some ghastly abyssal night-haunt for it. Our supermen should be champions of the real natural order, carriages of true justice in the karmic sense, not infallible, inflexible, infantile, lawfully good stooges of a constipated order as decreed by the comics code of ethics, not shallow, safe, suburban corporate honeypots as those of yesterdecades, and definitely not the diseased, decadent, shambling parodies of our lordly human ambitions they've devolved into. And on a final note, if you've seen my Project Outlander series, you might well guess that this line of thought is where derives its philosophical basis from. In essence, an alien being, unbound by our earthly cultural mores, social norms, legal hurdles, or bureaucratic regulations, as well as being totally beyond our ignoble efforts to cow them into submission on account of our lacking weapons sufficient to inflict meaningful damage on them. More on that is up and coming, I can assure you. But that's all just my strange opinion, and more than a little bit of wishful thinking at the end of the day. Take it for what you will, and don't forget to leave your own thoughts down in the usual place. And while you're there, maybe also consider leaving a like and subscribe. You can leave me a tip too if you think I'm worth it. And if you're a fan of science fantasy esoterica, go check out my books on Amazon. You'll find a lot of the same schizophrenia inspiration at work over there that trawls these here waters. And with all that said and done, as always, until next time, stay safe, stay sane, and remember, man is something that shall be overcome. Man is a rope tied between beast and Superman, a rope over an abyss. What is great in man is that he is a bridge and not an end. Peace.